What if the greatest threat to your freedom isn't outside you, but inside your mind? Imagine waking up one day to a world that no longer questions, to people around you who no longer think, not deeply, not critically, not at all. A world that has become so loud, so fast, so saturated with information that the human mind, once a sharp tool for curiosity and growth, has dulled into passive acceptance. Just think about that. What happens to a society when thinking becomes rare, when reason is replaced by reaction, when questions are replaced by slogans, when reflection is drowned out by noise? In this moment, as you're hearing these words, you're not just watching a video, you're stepping into a truth that most people are running from. The truth that we are losing our ability to think, and in its place, a rising tide of what philosophers now call collective stupidity, where the masses, not because they're foolish, but because they've been conditioned, blindly accept, shallowly believe, and slowly surrender their minds. But here's the terrifying part. It doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like comfort. It feels like belonging. It feels normal, because when you're surrounded by echoes, silence sounds like rebellion. When the crowd is running, stillness looks like defiance. And when everyone is sure, doubt is dangerous. In this journey, we're going to expose how this happened, why it happened, and what you can do right now to resist it. At the end of this path lies a truth so powerful, so urgent, it might just save your mind, or it might already be too late. But before we dive deeper, pause, breathe, and if this resonates, subscribe, leave a like, comment below. Not for vanity, but for visibility. Because messages like this don't spread easily. They threaten the system. This content might challenge how you see the world. It might shake what you believe. It might even make you uncomfortable. Good. That means it's working. Now, let's begin. Thinking is hard, uncomfortable, slow, and in today's world, it's discouraged. We're rewarded not for depth, but for speed, not for questions, but for certainty, not for contemplation, but for reaction. This is not an accident. This is design. Look around. Algorithms feed you what you want to hear. News delivers what confirms your bias. Education teaches you what to memorize, not how to explore. Society is not broken. It's working exactly as intended. It doesn't want thinkers. It wants followers. Years ago, Noam Chomsky warned us. He spoke of media, propaganda, and the manufacturing of consent. When people consume without question, agree without understanding, and believe without investigation, they become manageable, predictable, controllable, and critical thinking. That annoying habit of asking why becomes inconvenient. It slows down outrage. It disrupts ideologies. It dares to challenge. Is this really true? In today's world, that question alone can get you canceled, The roots of this run deep. We live under an avalanche of information, too much to process, too fast to evaluate. According to neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, we process 5 times more information per day than people did just a few decades ago. So what does the brain do? It shortcuts. It relies on habits, biases, crowd cues. Instead of truth, we look for signals. Instead of thinking, we imitate. This is called social proof. It's natural, it's human, but it's also dangerous. You see a post with 1 million likes and assume it must be right. You hear a phrase repeated 1,000 times and it starts to feel like truth. That's not thinking. That's programming. And here's the scary part. Most of us don't even realize it. Our thoughts aren't even ours anymore. And we think we're thinking, but we're just reacting. We think we're informed, but we're just overwhelmed. Now, ask yourself this. When was the last time you read something challenging and sat with it? When was the last time you heard a view you disliked and didn't attack it, but explored it? Can you even remember? This is what's being lost. Slow thought, deep thought, dangerous thought. And make no mistake, the consequences are devastating. Because when we stop thinking, we stop questioning. And when we stop questioning, we become vulnerable to manipulation, to propaganda, to fear. And the real question we must ask is this: who benefits when we no longer think for ourselves? In the silence between thoughts, a subtle war is being waged, not with guns, not with violence, but with attention. Every second of your day, your mind is being pulled by screens, by noise, by content engineered to distract. And what most people don't realize is that distraction is not just a side effect. It's the strategy. You're not being informed. You're being overloaded, flooded, until your critical thinking collapses under the weight. From the moment you wake up, your brain is hit with headlines, alerts, messages, updates, opinions. It doesn't stop, not for a second. And the human mind was never built for this. Overwhelmed minds don't think. They react. They default to shortcuts, biases, group behavior. Because thinking, real thinking, takes time. And time is the one thing distraction won't give you. So what happens next? You start seeking cues, not truth. You listen to what others believe, not what's actually real. You scroll past thousands of pieces of content every day. And slowly, without even knowing it, you stop questioning, you stop reflecting, and worst of all, you start conforming. Because it's easier, safer, faster. This is how collective stupidity begins. Not with a loss of intelligence, but with a loss of stillness, of space, of thought. And yet, there's another layer. It's not just the flood of information that's the problem. It's the filter. You're not seeing the world. You're seeing a version of it, shaped for you by algorithms, by systems, by those who understand how to steer perception without force. The most powerful kind of control is the kind that feels like freedom. You choose what to watch, what to click, what to believe. But were those choices ever really yours? Every video you see, every post you like, every story you're told is part of a feedback loop. One designed not to open your mind, but to trap it, to keep you engaged, predictable, divided. And in that loop, critical thinking is inconvenient. It slows the cycle down. It makes you harder to manipulate, which is why it's being phased out, quietly, systematically, socially. So what's the solution? It's not rebellion. It's not noise. It's awareness. The courage to pause, to step outside the cycle, to ask the questions no one else is asking, to think when others are reacting, to sit in discomfort while the world screams for quick answers. Because once you do that, once you reclaim that space inside your own mind, you become unshakable, not loud, not angry, but clear. You become the one thing the system fears most, a free thinker, calm, rooted, untouchable, and in a world that has forgotten how to think. That is nothing short of revolutionary. The decline of thinking didn't happen overnight. It crept in, slowly, quietly, and most of us didn't even notice. We traded depth for speed, understanding for opinion, wisdom for confidence. And we began to confuse being loud with being right. But thinking, real thinking, has never been loud. It's quiet. It happens in silence, in solitude, in the space between stimulus and response. And that space is shrinking. Most people don't even pause anymore. Something happens, and within seconds, they react. With anger, with outrage, with certainty, but not with thought. And why should they? They've been trained not to reflect, but to respond, not to question, but to perform. In this culture, thinking is a disruption, an inconvenience, a risk. Ask too many questions and you're difficult. Doubt what everyone agrees on and you're dangerous. Change your mind and you're weak. So instead, we conform. We mimic the language of our tribe. We repeat the talking points. We post, we like, we share. But we don't think. Because thinking is lonely. And in a hyper-connected world, no one wants to be alone. But here's the truth. Thinking is not a group activity. It begins within. Before discussion, before debate, there must be contemplation. And we are losing that. We are forgetting what it means to sit with complexity, to not rush for answers, to not fear uncertainty, but to explore it, to admit, I don't know. I need time. I need to learn. But those phrases don't go viral. Certainty does. Anger does. Extremes do. Because this system doesn't run on thought. It runs on engagement, on reaction, on emotion. So the calm thinker, the quiet observer, the one who pauses before speaking, is invisible. But invisibility does not mean weakness. In fact, it is power. Because when you are not trapped in the current, you can see where the river leads. And today, the current is heading somewhere dark. Look at the trends. We read less, we skim more, we consume rapidly, but we retain almost nothing. We jump from tab to tab, topic to topic, never diving deep. We form opinions on things we barely understand, and then defend them, as if our identity depended on it. And maybe it does, because for many, their beliefs are not ideas they hold. They are who they are. Challenge the belief, and you challenge the person. And so, discussion becomes war. Dialogue becomes battle, and truth becomes irrelevant. What matters is winning. What matters is being seen. What matters is the performance. But here's the tragedy: a world where everyone performs leaves no room for authenticity, no room for growth, no room for learning. And without those things, what are we left with? A society that echoes itself, that punishes doubt, that rewards noise. And in that society, critical thinking isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. So the question is, will you conform, or will you stop and think? Because in the pause, in that quiet defiance, a new kind of power is born. Not the power of influence or attention, but the power of clarity. The power to see what others miss, to resist what others accept, to think. When others forget how did we get here? How did a species capable of building civilizations, exploring galaxies, decoding DNA, lose the will to think? The truth is, it didn't happen by chance. It was designed, and to see that design, we have to look at where it all begins: education. From the earliest years of life, children are taught to memorize, not to wonder, to repeat, not to question, to obey, not to explore. And little by little, they learn the most important lesson of all: don't think too much. Follow the curriculum. Give the right answers. Don't color outside the lines. Curiosity becomes a distraction. Creativity becomes a threat. Originality becomes a risk. And so, by the time we reach adulthood, thinking for ourselves feels foreign, dangerous, even rebellious. But it doesn't stop in school. It follows us everywhere. In the workplace, we're told to stay in line, to meet expectations, to avoid conflict, to keep our heads down. In relationships, we're pressured to agree, to fit in, to not rock the boat. Even in our private thoughts, we start censoring ourselves. And the cost of this silent conformity is enormous, because what begins as obedience becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. We forget how to think because we stopped practicing. And without practice, even the sharpest mind grows dull. But there's another reason we avoid thinking. It hurts. Real thought, the kind that questions, doubts, challenges, can be deeply uncomfortable because it forces us to confront the unknown, to admit our ignorance, to see the cracks in what we once believed. And for many people, that's terrifying. It's easier to be certain, to hold tight to your tribe, to believe what feels safe. Because when you begin to think, truly think, you risk everything: your comfort, your reputation, even your sense of who you are. But what's the alternative? A life of borrowed opinions? A mind that never questions? A soul that never grows? The psychologist Erich Fromm once said, "Most people are not truly free because they fear the responsibility that comes with freedom." And thinking, real thinking, is the most radical form of freedom there is. It means owning your beliefs, owning your doubts, owning your mistakes. It means you can't blame others for your ignorance. You can't hide behind the crowd. You can't pretend anymore. And for those who crave comfort over clarity, that's too high a price. So they trade freedom for ease, depth for distraction, truth for safety. But here's the thing they don't tell you. Comfort is a cage, and silence is surrender. Every time you ignore a question, you reinforce the lie. Every time you stay quiet, you deepen the sleep. Until one day, you wake up in a world that doesn't think anymore, and by then it might be too late. So if you feel that pull, that discomfort, that itch, that whisper in your mind, listen to it, because that is thought trying to survive, trying to break through, trying to wake you up. Once you begin to see it, you can't unsee it. The manipulation, the conditioning, the subtle engineering of your mind. You notice how your feed is curated, how your thoughts echo back to you, not because they're true, but because they're profitable. You start to realize that every click, every like, every comment is not just engagement, it's data, it's control, it's psychological architecture. Social media, once a tool for connection, has become a battlefield, not of weapons, but of ideas. But these ideas aren't explored. They're shouted, simplified, stripped of nuance. Every platform rewards outrage. It promotes division. It amplifies extremism. Why? Because rage gets more clicks than reason. Certainty sells better than doubt. And tribalism keeps you scrolling. The system doesn't want you to think. It wants you to react, to consume, to conform. And in the middle of all this noise, thoughtfulness feels weak, reflection feels slow, silence feels irrelevant. But silence is where clarity lives. The philosopher Marshall McLuhan once said, "The medium is the message," meaning how you receive information shapes what you understand and how you think. And today's mediums, they reward speed over substance, emotion over logic, volume over wisdom. Even truth itself has become distorted. In the age of misinformation, what matters is not what is true, but what is viral. People no longer verify facts, they verify popularity. They believe what gets shared, not what gets proven. And this is the most dangerous kind of ignorance, not lack of knowledge, but the illusion of knowing, the belief that because something feels familiar, it must be right. But familiarity is not truth. Repetition is not evidence, and consensus is not certainty. So where do we go from here? We begin by asking better questions, not just the ones that are easy, but the ones that challenge, that disturb, that demand real answers. What are you being told to believe? Who benefits from that belief? What assumptions are hiding inside your certainty? How often do you seek out the other side, not to attack it, but to understand it? Because the antidote to collective stupidity is not just intelligence, it's courage. Courage to be wrong, courage to change, courage to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." That wasn't self-deprecation, it was discipline, it was a way of life, a reminder that truth is not something you inherit, it's something you earn through questioning, through listening, through thought. And yet, in this culture, humility is rare, certainty is worship, arrogance is mistaken for wisdom. Everyone has an opinion, but few have understanding. Everyone wants to speak, but few want to listen. And so the true thinkers, the deep ones, are often silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they know real thought is not noise, it's depth. In a world that rewards performance, thinking has become invisible. But those who think, they see. They see what others ignore. They hear what others dismiss. They sense the manipulation hiding behind convenience. Because once you step outside the noise, everything becomes clearer. You begin to notice when you're being played, when your attention is being hijacked, when your emotions are being triggered on purpose. You start to see the difference between influence and insight, between education and indoctrination, between connection and performance. But here's the cost. To think critically, to truly think for yourself, is to walk alone. You'll be misunderstood, mocked, dismissed, because most people aren't looking for truth. They're looking for comfort. And thought is not always comfortable. It forces you to confront the things you don't want to see. It pulls you out of your tribe. It strips away your false certainty. And for many, that's too much. So they choose the easier path. The path of slogans, of repetition, of blind belief. They outsource their thinking to politicians, to influencers, to movements. They trade their mental sovereignty for belonging. But you, if you're still here, still listening, you are not most people. You're seeking something deeper, and that seeking, that hunger for truth, is the beginning of something powerful. Because clarity is contagious. One person who thinks clearly can wake up thousands, not with noise, not with force, but with presence. The quiet power of a mind that can't be manipulated. So ask yourself, are you willing to think, even when it hurts, even when it isolates you, even when it changes everything? Because once you do, you become free. Free from illusions, free from emotional slavery, free from the system that needs you to stay asleep. But here's the thing they don't want you to know. That kind of freedom is dangerous, because a free mind can't be bought, can't be bullied, can't be bent to serve someone else's agenda. It questions, it resists, it creates, and that is a threat to the status quo. So, what will you choose? Comfort or clarity, belonging or truth? Because you can't have both, not in this world, not now. But if you choose truth, even if it costs you, you gain something nothing can take away. Your mind, your own, awake, alive, unshaken. The most dangerous part of this crisis is not that people can't think. It's that they're afraid to think. Because thinking, real critical thinking, is risky. It can tear apart your worldview, challenge your identity, expose the lies you've been living in. And that kind of honesty, it's not welcome in a world addicted to comfort. So we build walls, mental walls, emotional walls, ideological walls, and behind those walls, we feel safe. We surround ourselves with people who think like us, talk like us, vote like us, pray like us, and anything that threatens that safety, we label as dangerous, as wrong, as other. But in doing so, we don't just reject ideas. We reject reality. We reject growth. We reject truth. Because truth is not something that conforms to your identity. Truth doesn't care how you feel. Truth doesn't apologize for being uncomfortable. But most people don't want truth. They want validation. They want to be told they're right, that they're good, that their side is winning. So we tune in to what confirms us, and we tune out anything that confronts us. But ask yourself, is that strength or is that fear? Because a strong mind doesn't run from challenge. It seeks it. It welcomes it. It grows from it. But a fragile mind, it shuts down. It cancels. It hides behind slogans and never asks, could I be wrong? And let's be honest, we've all been wrong about people, about politics, about the world, about ourselves. But only the brave admit it. Only the honest reflect on it. Only the free grow from it. Because growth requires friction. No one evolves in comfort. No one matures in echo chambers. No one becomes wise by being right all the time. Wisdom is born in doubt, in humility, in silence. And silence is rare now. We're always performing, always broadcasting, always proving ourselves to people who probably aren't even listening. But the truth? It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need a platform. It just needs a place to land, inside a mind that's still open. So here's the challenge. Can you slow down? Can you shut out the noise? Can you question even the things you love most, even the beliefs that shaped you, even the tribe that defines you? Because if you can, if you dare to go that deep, you will discover something most people never find. Yourself, not your persona, not your profile, not your politics, but your mind. Clear, unfiltered, alive. That's the power of thinking. It doesn't just change what you know, it changes who you are. And when you change who you are, you change everything. This is the final step, the last breath, before awakening. And if you've made it this far, then something inside you is already awake. Because at the heart of this entire crisis, beneath the noise, the manipulation, the systems, the screens, there is something far more dangerous. The real reason critical thinking is disappearing is not because we're incapable of it. It's because we're afraid of what it might reveal. Because to think critically, truly, fearlessly, means risking everything that keeps us psychologically safe: our beliefs, our identity, our group, our pride. And so, most people, even the smart ones, choose denial, choose distraction, choose illusion, because thinking might force them to confront themselves. But here's the truth that no one tells you. You are not your beliefs. You are not your politics. You are not your past. You are a conscious mind, capable of choosing, capable of changing, capable of truth. But only if you're willing to face it. And here is the final, most important truth of all. Critical thinking is not just an intellectual act, it is a spiritual one. It is the rebellion of a soul that refuses to be programmed. It is the quiet revolution of a mind that won't surrender to the collective noise. It is the sacred decision to seek truth, even when it's painful, even when it costs you, even when no one else will. Because once you begin to think for yourself, you see the structures, you see the manipulation, you see the masks, and yes, it can be overwhelming, even disorienting, but it's real. And reality, no matter how uncomfortable, is the only place freedom can live. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And yet, that's exactly what's needed now, to face our assumptions, our fears, our unconscious patterns, our comfortable lies. Because thinking is not just about questioning the world, it's about questioning ourselves. Why do I believe this? Where did this thought come from? What part of me is afraid to let go of it? That's where wisdom begins. And wisdom is what our world is starving for. In a culture obsessed with quick answers, wisdom invites deeper questions. In a system built on noise, wisdom offers silence. In an era of mass conformity, wisdom dares to be free. So now, you have a choice: to go back to the scrolling, the shouting, the echo chambers, or to rise, to become something rare, a mind that cannot be bought, a soul that refuses to be silenced. Because no system, no school, no screen will give you that. You have to claim it, alone. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. You begin to think clearly, deliberately, unapologetically, and from that place, you begin to live, not as a follower, not as a product, not as a puppet, but as a creator, as a seeker, as a light. And in a dark world, one mind lit by truth can ignite 1,000 more. So don't stop, don't settle, don't sleep. Ask the harder questions, face the real fears. Become the thinker this world needs. Because in a time where everyone is reacting, the most revolutionary thing you can do is think.